Welcome back, everybody, to the second part of my interview with Gary Bracey of Ocean fame. Now, at the end of the last part of this interview, we just mentioned that he was about to leave Ocean and break off for a little of her new lands, but couldn't quite let Ocean go. So we're going to be going first back into Ocean, taking care of some stuff there before his career takes a whole bunch of interesting turns. And maybe we come back to Ocean at the end. So, have fun.
Now, before we start to really delve into that transition phase where consoles become a much bigger issue and the economics of that, I did want to talk a little bit more about the movie and arcade game licensing. We talked quite extensively already about it. How the movie people, as soon as they realize there's money in Demdar Hills, kept pushing up the prices and everything else. So how detailed or how good were your calculations or your ability to predict software sales when putting in those kind of bids for these games?
I think, we viewed the licenses purely as a marketing vehicle. That's what it was. So I guess the cost was a marketing cost. The cost of licensing was the marketing cost. So we figured that if the movie was successful, then we'd ride on the coattails of that success. The risk was in whether the movie was going to be successful or not. If it was, then it worked out well. I mean, it was never a fortune. We tried to back end these things on royalties as much as possible. So the guarantees, until we got to the Jurassic Park days, the guarantees weren't astronomical. But unless we felt that it was a surefire hit, something like Batman, we knew was going to be huge. Robocop was a lot more speculative. So Untouchables, we thought was going to be really good. We thought Addams Family was going to be a big movie. It was good. It wasn't huge. But we did really well out of it because it was one of the greatest games we ever made. So I guess the combination of the two, the quality of the game plus the profile of the license, actually mitigated a lot of the risk.
Gotcha. Now, one of the big differences that I've heard talking to both people in the industry in the US versus Europe was the turnover rate of the software. So the shelf life, how long you could keep a game on the shelf. Americans shops tended to be mom and pop shops someplace. If there were computer software, the chains came in, but still you could, a copy of Microprose Gunship would be on the shelf for 5 years.
Yes.
You did not have that kind of market in the UK. What was your estimated shelf life for a game? How long could you keep it on the shelf before it had to be replaced by a new title?
It wasn't quite as bad as you painted, because if we were able to get the game out, let's take licenses, for instance. Coin-op game licenses were more perennial. They had a longer shelf life. But movies obviously were finite. They were more now. But having said that, we had several bites of the cherry, because if we release the game in time for the actual theatrical release, then that would be great. And then the video, 6 months later, 6 months later, and we had a second bite then. So it was then also, while I think on, we had a third bite of the cherry, four bites. The second bite was compilations. So we create a compilation disc or tape of several games. And then after that, we'd have the budget release. So actually, we were able to extend it over a year or several years in some cases. So But yes, the initial release was very finite, and I'd say unless it was a huge title, it would be gone off the shelves within a month to 6 weeks, which is a really short time.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a very, very short time. I mean, I can imagine if you then also would have to time when news and reviews of the games would show up in the magazines in order to make sure that that marketing, if you miss that window, you miss that window in a big way.
Yeah, yeah, and that's why it was important to try and get the game out in time for the movie release, because we lose, as you say, that window, and we'd have to take a view then on whether to release just concurrently with the video release and maybe do a co-marketing campaign with the video company. So we had various options.
Gotcha. Now, you mentioned compilations, and obviously that is one of those things that a lot of people remember. I remember seeing ads for that a lot in the magazines. And the question then becomes, when you're re-releasing on a compilation, number one, what are the economics of the compilation from a materials cost, from a marketing cost, and so forth? But then also, like you just said, you tried to back end a lot. How did that play in? Because you're no longer getting the full retail price for the game.
No, so we'd have in the original licensing contract, we'd have a provision for compilations, and it would be proportional. So if we were paying a 10% royalty, then they wouldn't get 10% of the whole compilation pack. They'd get 10% of the quarter that the game, if it was 4 games. So it worked out that way. The material cost actually wasn't too bad, particularly when we got to the disc days, because we were able to put all the games onto one disc. So the materials cost was pretty much the same as a single game. So economically, it made a lot more sense.
Gotcha. And for retailers, how big of an issue were those compilation box for the retailers? I mean, you got a lot more games taking up one slot. Was it seen as a less risky option than individual titles?
No, because again, they were older titles. They wouldn't be on a compilation until they were a little bit past their sell-by date. So it was more of a value thing, and great for the granny purchase again. So, and most of the stores, at least in the UK, had separate shelving, if you like, for compilations and that type of thing. So they didn't detract. It was in a different section.
Gotcha. Now, okay, so I'm going through the mental checklist in my head of the things that I still wanted to talk about before we leave the 8-bit days. Now, the one of the big things, and we touched upon this briefly, was the Commodore 64 GS, the game system, that weird cartridge thing. Now, Ocean was a big supporter of that. I mean, there was extra tech developed to make those cartridge games possible. Do you recall, I mean, why there was such a big push to this? Was it Ocean's first real go at cartridges? What was the thinking at the time?
We had a great relationship with Commodore, which actually pinnacled and peaked at the time of the Batman Amiga release. Um, but no, we wanted to support them. I mean, Amstrad also brought out a cartridge machine, and we wanted to show support. They'd always supported us. And we saw on the horizon, Nintendo 8-bit was starting to make its presence felt in Japan, certainly. So we felt this was the way things were going to go. I just recall, and my memory is pretty hazy about this, but we had real problems with the Commodore cartridges. We had a really big faulty proportion, percentage. And I can't remember who manufactured the cartridges, whether it was a third party, whether it was Commodore, but I do recall we put a number of cartridges out and the returns were horrendous. And of course, these were expensive. These weren't your pennies for a cassette tape. These were pounds and pounds. So it was very short lived. It didn't last long, at least not for us. And I think the same with the Amstrad. We didn't have a problem returns-wise with the Amstrad, but it just didn't take off.
Gotcha. Yeah, I believe one of, if not the pack-in for the thing, had some Ocean software on it, including Terminator 2. And
Yes.
it was coded improperly, so you actually needed a keyboard to access some of the stuff. Yeah.
Good thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. And you mentioned already the Batman tie-in was the pinnacle of your relationship with Commodore. That's obviously then the 16-bit, the Amiga pack-in. The story's been told a million times before, but I definitely need to hear it because it is an interesting one. This idea of packing in software with a game, with the system. Obviously, in game consoles, it's a well-established thing, and there it's always the manufacturer's games. Sega putting Altered Beast or Mario with a Nintendo system. Now, Commodore, you guys get a pack-in with the Batman the movie tie-in game. How does that conversation even get started?
As I say, we had a really good relationship with the Commodore guys. David Pleasance was the sales director, I believe, at the time, and we told them we had this, the Batman license. We were doing the game for the forthcoming Amiga. They had already released and launched the Amiga, but what they wanted to do was for Christmas, which is obviously the big selling season, produce or present a major value pack for the Amiga 500. And bearing in mind, they were looking for any leverage against the Atari ST, which was their direct competitor. They were the two 16-bit machines. So they brought out the Amiga 500, which I can't recall whether the Amiga came out maybe a year or two or so before the Amiga 500. The Amiga 500 was just a smaller, cheaper, less memory version of the Amiga, the pure Amiga, if you like, the 1000. And I can't remember whether the Amiga 500 was launched with the Batman pack or it
It
came.
launched the year before. No, it launches in the US, I believe, in '87. So it would have been 2 years before.
Oh,
But I
okay.
don't know when it
Okay.
gets a UK launch. So it could have
Okay.
been a year
Wouldn't
before, a
be
year and
too
a half,
long.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it wouldn't be too long after that. But anyway, um, the license was negotiated. Commodore said, "We really want this. We really want this." We'd shown them the game in development, and they saw that it was a really good game. So you had that perfect storm of a top license, and the Batman movie was huge in those days. You had the biggest license with a great game, a 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 game, and that's what we negotiated. I didn't negotiate, but I think Paul Patterson, the sales director, negotiated it, and we went ahead and did it. And I think Commodore have acknowledged that this pack, this idea, the Batman pack, was a major catalyst for the significant sales, at least in Europe. I'm not sure about the US, but I imagine it contributed significantly also. So it was a great deal all round, and of course, bearing in mind, Commodore put a lot of marketing behind this Amiga 500 Batman pack, which really benefited us because on the back of that, we'd sell the other versions of the Batman game on the ST and goodness knows what. So it was a really, really high profile event. And as I say, Commodore have acknowledged that the Batman pack was responsible for massive sales of the Amiga.
Definitely. Now, Batman, unlike the RoboCop license, was not a all-encompassing license. You guys had the computer games, but you didn't have the arcade game. You didn't have the pinball. You didn't have the
That's right.
console game licenses. So, but you had previously already had the Batman license. You'd made the first two Batman video/computer games. So now, how did that happen? Did you seek to have the all-encompassing license, or did you get there and it was already taken? What was that like?
The Batman license was expensive. I don't remember. I honestly don't remember how much it was. But in those days, it was deemed to be an expensive, high-profile license. And the movie companies were getting canny, and they knew that they could make money out of it. But they knew there were a number of revenue centers from their licenses, so they decided to carve it out where we could. We always got all electronic licenses for the properties we took. But in this case, they had a huge licensing department and they carved it out as much as possible. I remember John Woods and I went going to Pinewood Studios for a licensing meeting with all the licensees, the toy licensees and the book license, everyone. And there were lots of different books, you know, different publishers had different rights for different books. So it was natural then for them to carve out the coin-op rights and the console rights, etc., etc. We were happy with the home computer rights.
Gotcha. No, I totally understand. Now, I'm very curious because I've never seen one of these contracts. But what was a typical period of time that you'd have the rights for? So how many years would you be able to publish that game?
I think we normally went for 5 years because that would allow us to do what we described before, the compilations and the budget releases and everything else, which we did. So I think it was typically 5 years. In some cases, it might have been three. I really don't remember in the case of Batman, but I suspect it would have been 5 years.
Gotcha. Now, both Batman and RoboCop, when your versions of the game get released on home computers in the US, Data East does the distribution. What was the relationship you had there? Was it just a title by title basis? Did they have the rights to all your games? What was that selection process like?
It was a title by title basis because obviously some of the games that we published weren't suitable for the US. Maybe in some cases we didn't have the US rights. I don't, probably less likely. But we had a really good relationship with Data East. I think it began when we started licensing a couple of coin-op games from them. That relationship grew. John Woods was the one who drove that. And we got very, very tight in with Data East. That came to a head with the Robocop license, and that was a collaborative effort in terms of the property and where we exploited it. They did the coin-op, the pinball, etc., etc. And then about a year or two, I'm not very good on dates, but a year or two after that, we decided that it would make a lot more sense for us to actually create our own publishing division in the US, and Ocean of America was born. And in fact, we brought over the CEO, Ray Musey, who was running Data East. He became head president of Ocean US. I was senior vice president of development for Ocean US, but still based in the UK, the UK company.
Okay.
And that's how that sort of company evolved.
Now, when you're now we're probably jumping forward. I mean, what was that, 92, 93 when you established?
Don't ask me dates.
Okay.
I'm terrible with dates. I'm just wondering if I could have a reference for it. I can't. It was probably 89, 90.
Okay.
Yeah, I left in 93, I think. So it was a few years before that. I think it was about 90.
Okay. And so when you are now having to make decisions about what is going to be released in the US, what is your education like in regards to that? What did you do to have to understand what would be successful or what was likely to be successful in the US market versus what you had already been successful with in the UK?
Well, we found that it was pretty much mirrored. What was successful in the UK, by and large, was generally successful in the US. And I guess the main criteria was whether it was a good game or not. A good game sold. The licenses sold, and if it was a high-profile movie license, that would blanket the whole of the globe, really. So yeah, it wasn't too bad. I'd spent so much of my time over in the US anyway. I'd had a good feel for it, and I think I saw this. I can't remember whether I mentioned this earlier. I saw this license while I was over in the US. There was a new TV show coming out, and I saw it. I came back and I said, "Look, we've got to get the license for this TV show." And they, oh no, it's an animation. It's not for us. And it was The Simpsons,
Oh, yeah.
which obviously became phenomenal. And then a year or two later, when it had established itself and became massive, Acclaim got that license, which we then sub-licensed from them. But so I was really, personally, I was immersed in the US culture. I was big into movies as a personal passion anyway. Comic books I loved. So I was really into that culture, and I felt I understood it pretty well. And that obviously colored my opinions on which properties might be of interest to publish a game on. So that sort of worked in our favor, I think.
Gotcha. Now, speaking of one more thing about licenses, sorry that I'm harping on licenses. It's an interesting legal topic. So some of the games Ocean's released were originally arcade licenses, but you guys also did some of your own sequels, like the Renegades, Target
Yeah.
Renegade and Renegade 3. Was that built into the original license that you could do spin-off games, or was
No.
that something that had to be negotiated on a game-by-game basis?
It had to be negotiated. And again, it was down to relationships. We had a great relationship with Taito, who were the publishers of Renegade. And Renegade was an enormous hit for us on the coin-op side. I don't know how big the game was in the actual arcades, but it lent itself so well to computer, and the guys did a magnificent job in the conversion. So we went to Taito and said, look, we'd like to use the title again. We used it 3 times. We had Renegade and Target Renegade. So they said yes, and obviously the royalty was a lot lower because we didn't have any material to actually copy. And I think Renegade 2 was even more popular than the original. Renegade 2 got great reviews, which was obviously completely invented in-house. So little fun story. With Renegade, we had to change the German version because when they fought, there was splashes of blood, and Germany at the time didn't allow violence in computer games. So we had to turn the blood for the German version green. And the scenario was they were aliens disguised as humans, which was okay. Sorry, bit of a digression there, but it's a story I'd forgotten.
Oh, it's something that has happened many, many times. Half-Life
Yeah.
and all sorts of games have gone through that. Commando
Oh, yes.
from Elite, they did the same thing.
Yeah. They didn't like war themes or violence or anything.
Yeah. Oh, well, that must have been a fun extra bill to have to pay to fix that. But oh well.
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
So now, okay, so you've got all these. You're doing the license thing. You're using all this. We talked already about moving to floppy disks and the 16-bit, moving on to PC. Now, at what point does Ocean really make the decision that you have to jump into the console market in a big way? What was it, just a decline in the PC market, or just because the
No,
opportunity was too lucrative to pass up?
it certainly wasn't a decline. Computer games was still going strongly, but obviously we identified an opportunity. And bearing in mind, at this point, we didn't see ourselves as a European company. We were a global company. We were exporting our games everywhere, either via sub-licensing or directly exporting the discs stroke tapes. So this was an obvious next step for us to explore. But of course, as I mentioned before, it was a big step because the cost of goods was hugely more than the original formats. So we saw the trends. I think we sort of kept a close eye on, and bearing in mind, we had a good relationship with Nintendo. One of the coin-ops we licensed was Mario Brothers, and we did the computer game version of Mario Brothers. So we had a pretty good relationship with Nintendo, which didn't harm us getting publisher rights because they were quite particular about who they allowed to publish on their precious console. You know, it was those days they picked and chose who their partners should be, and you had to be in one camp or the other. You had to be either Nintendo or Sega, and we went with the Nintendo. I think, well, not because they were the biggest anyway, but also because we had a pre-existing relationship with them. So that was it. It was just a natural evolution of our business. It was another format. It was a big risk, and we had to think a lot about it because of the cost of goods, as I say, and the approvals process. I think what people don't realize is let's take a movie license, for instance. We create the game, we send the game, the concept, to the licensor, the movie company, for approval, and they say yes, okay. But then when the game's complete, they have to approve it. They have to approve the graphics and the imagery and the artwork and everything else. That takes time. So when I mentioned before, we tried to get the game out in time for the movie. The game had to be finished significantly earlier than the movie release to get through the approvals process. So we go through the approvals process. They say, okay, finally sign off the approval. And we go, great. Now we've got to send it to Nintendo for them to publish. And they had a very rigorous approvals process also. Not so much aesthetics. They didn't comment on the game or the quality of the game, but more bugs and technical issues. And they tested extensively, which took a lot of time. And again, that ate into our marketing window. So there was the risk increased. You know, you're trying to get something out for the holiday season, a Batman type title, and that could be delayed because of the approvals. And if they didn't approve it, they found a problem. You had to address that problem, then send it back for reapproval. And it was a nightmare. It was very stressful.
I'll believe that. And did that require you guys to rethink internal quality control procedures or the way that you did testing?
No, not really, because we felt we were very rigorous, and we were. We had great QA people, and we went through it. But of course, what we may not have had are all the different variations of generations of Nintendo, or the NES as it was. And then you've got the Japanese one and the American one, and you've got different voltages. And there are so many potential issues. So we tried our best. And I'm not saying that we came afoul of the approvals process necessarily, but it was just a process that took time. We didn't necessarily constantly fail those processes, but it just had to be undertaken by Nintendo, and it was a time issue.
Understood. So the success or failure of the games, how did that determine your process? Because you mentioned, and sorry, let me rephrase that. Last time we spoke, you talked about how the transition period, especially with PC growing larger, and you mentioned that 3D was the big game changer. So you've got, on the one side, you've got this burgeoning console market with the very expensive lead times, very expensive QA, very expensive materials costs, NES, and then you've got the Super NES, and I'm trying to remember. I think you guys did release games also on the Genesis, right? Were you on the Sega?
Yeah, we did. I think that was maybe after I'm not sure. I don't think we did actually. We did release on the Sega, the Dreamcast, etc. But that was later on, and I think it was after I left. Again, hazy on
Okay.
dates, but if you can tell, up until 92, 93, I think we're pretty Nintendo exclusive.
Yeah, that's also my memory of it. I don't remember
Yes.
too many ocean titles appearing
No,
on the
we didn't.
Genesis.
We didn't do Sega. I'm trying to
Yeah.
think. No, even Jurassic Park. Uh, when we were talking earlier about carving out the rights, they separated the rights for Nintendo and Sega,
Yeah,
and I think Sega themselves got the rights for Jurassic Park on their console, and we have the Nintendo and PC rights.
exactly, exactly. So, uh, you you're working on Super Nintendo, you're working on NES, you're working on the home computers, and around the same time, 3D is starting to become a thing on the PC. You do have some games, and was it Battle Command, the tank
Yeah, we
game?
did. These were sort of vector graphic
Yeah,
3D things.
yeah,
I mentioned DID earlier,
yeah.
the F-29 Retaliator flight sims and all those. Those weren't actually the 3D games I was alluding to.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
the big sea change for 3D came with the launch of the PlayStation, and we're jumping ahead a little bit more there. But that was true 3D, whereby it was the first graphical computer stroke console which allowed you to go into the screen rather than just scrolling across, and that was the big sea change. We'd already had vector graphics. You mentioned microprose earlier. I mean, they were the leaders in flight
Mm,
sims, and they were all 3D. So but that was about the extent of 3D. We did RoboCop, actually. RoboCop 3
yeah.
was in 3D, and that was sort of vector based. But very clunky. But they were the precursor. I think the first 3D game I recall in a sort of arcadey type game context was Doom. And that
Mm,
was that wasn't a smooth transition into the screen. That was duh, 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 duh. So it wasn't true 3D. As I say, it was only when PlayStation came along that had dedicated 3D graphics chips that enabled us to actually create some pretty interesting 3D games. And
right.
that actually, that I mean, I've always said, and it's quite upsetting that there aren't many original games coming out these days. There aren't many truly original concepts. The last truly original game I can think of, and I'm going to get killed for this, was the likes of Portal or something. That was very. I'm talking about a game mechanic, and that's why every game was sort of derivative up to the point of PlayStation. And when PlayStation was launched, Tomb Raider was there, and that changed everything. But now here we are, you know, 20 odd years later, 25 years later, and we're still developing the same games, the same genres, and the same game mechanics. There have been some exceptions, but by and large, there hasn't been a great deal of innovation on the design side. And maybe that's because maybe there isn't anything, but I'd hate to believe that there isn't.
Yeah, I mean, you'd really have to, when you dive into the indie scene, that's when you do get some fairly out there concepts of how to do
Yes.
games. uh, Probably the last one that really took me by surprise was a game called Night of the Consumers. But it's there's this guy on itch.io, and he releases games, and think of Doom style graphics, but and it's a Doom gameplay. But the idea is it's right before Christmas. You've been hired as temporary help at this store, and it's all misty and foggy, and you're supposed to go in here and you have to stock the shelves, and there's consumers lurking, and you have to constantly watch behind you, and then they'll walk up behind you and suddenly scream at you that they need a product, and you have to run and find the product in the shelf before they get so angry that they complain to your boss and you lose your job. One of the most stressful games. I mean, it is.
Really.
Forget Resident Evil Alone in the Dark. This is survival horror at its best, and it's also hilarious.
Platform? What platform is it on?
PC.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, I know what
but
you're saying. It's still.
it's still. I mean, but that is that's a game concept. And I love the idea, and I'm going to check it out. Actually,
Oh yeah, definitely. I'll send you a link. It costs me like $2, and it's hilarious.
But the mechanic is still a traditional mechanic.
That's true.
The actual game mechanic itself is still traditional. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, I agree.
You know, Angry Birds was a departure. That was very different. And even you could argue Candy Crush or whatever came before it, that type of mechanic, the Match 3, those were innovative. I mean, okay, we had Dr. Mario many years ago, which was the precursor to the Match 3 games, the traditional Match 3 games. But you know, I'm still struggling to find, and I don't just mean a new game mechanic. I'm talking about a great game mechanic that actually everyone wants to play. It's so different. It doesn't matter about the scenario. You can change the scenario, whether you're in a store or whether you're in a gloomy castle. But it's the actual game mechanic, and I am looking for that new, innovative, refreshing game mechanic that blows everything else away, because it will.
Yeah. Ocean seemed to be doing a lot more original games at the beginning of the 90s. I mean, games like Sleepwalker, like I said, Battle Command, and so forth, the DID games. Was this a concerted effort to move away from reliance on outside licenses?
No, what I was very, very keen on doing was try to create our own IP, and also give new talent a shot. Although the people who did Battle Command, they were well experienced. But the guys who did Sleepwalker, they were new. Pushover, which was a great game mechanic. That was a very original game mechanic. Yeah. The people who did that. So, and then you had, as you said, DID, you had Sensible Software. So we were trying to encourage new talent. And, you know, I've always been passionate about original games. We're trying to develop some in-house as well. So with the advent of the PlayStation, we got Silicon Graphics machines in, it gave a lot more creative scope for the designers to think a little bit more outside the box. And of course, bearing in mind, when we were licensed stuff, we were restricted with what we could do. We didn't have a blank sheet of paper. So what we wanted to do, we had great designers, great artists, great engineers. We wanted to create something that was a little different. So it wasn't instead of, it was just another path that I was keen to pursue.
Understand. Now, we kind of then need to talk about, the Jurassic Park license. You mentioned that Sega had their own chunk of those rights. You had the home computers and consoles. Now, this was, and I believe I'm correct in saying this was the first time you guys had a movie license and you did not do 8-bit ports to home computers. You did do an NES game, I believe. But
we did do an NES game,
but you didn't do C64, Spectrum, and Amstrad.
I think it was dying out by then. It was pretty much dead. The 16 bits had taken over. Console was coming up fast. The 8 bits were becoming a little bit more obsolete. The main market for them at the time was compilations and budget cassettes.
Gotcha. So it was just a pure economics, it didn't pay off, or was it a question of the game design wouldn't have been convertible?
The game design wouldn't have been convertible, but also a resource issue. You know, we threw pretty much half of our development studio at this game, because again, it was multiple scenarios, and we wanted to make sure we could do the best job we could in a relatively short amount of time. So yeah, it just didn't make sense.
Understand. Now, so Super Nintendo is a major platform for you guys. It seemed it replaced the NES. The Amiga and ST markets, I'm guessing, were not growing as quickly or at the time that the Super NES
They
hits.
were still healthy. I think. I think once PlayStation was announced, that was the death knell for the 16-bit games computers. PC would always flourish because it was a productivity machine as well. So, and they were upgrading their graphics. They went from CGA to EGA to goodness knows what, and the sound cards, etc., etc. So PC became the constant, and I'm talking about Windows PC, Microsoft PC, and Mac as well to a lesser extent. But the home computers were actually dying out at that point, starting to die out. And I think PlayStation saw the end of Amiga and ST as well. Because at the end of the day, those were pretty much games machines. A lot of artists use the Amiga for graphics, and a lot of musicians use the ST for sampling, etc., and sequencing. But by and large, most of those machines were used for games. And once consoles came out, and it was immediate, you put the cartridge in, no loading time, bang, you're in there. That sort of was the beginning of the end for the traditional home computer home computers.
Understand. And so when PlayStation gets announced, and there were other systems obviously at around the same time. You got the 3DO, you had the CDI, you had Sega with the Saturn, and so forth. What was the process like for you to evaluate who you were going to be working with, and where you were going to go with all this?
You're talking about which console?
Which console to support?
Well, it was a no-brainer. PlayStation was the only one, as to the best of my knowledge. I mean, it was innovative. That we'll never forget, those of us who were around at the time, the great dinosaur demo. They showed this amazing Jurassic Park quality, we thought at the time, dinosaur. What we didn't realize is that, when they showed this massive 3D dinosaur with the detail, likes of which we'd never seen before in any sort of computer or console, what we didn't realize is that actually took up the entire resource of the machine. They couldn't do a game based on that. It was just a graphical demo, but it did give a really good feel of what was possible on the PlayStation, and the 3D was the main thing. And that changed, as I keep saying, that did change everything.
Gotcha. And so when you're trying to figure out how much or what to use, I mean, is the decision, okay, we're going to take whatever big properties we happen to have at the time and leverage those for the game design, or is that going to take too much off the top because we're going to have to invest so much in the development tools? What does it? Can you use the staff that you already have in order to even try to start work on this? What's that boost up process look like?
Yeah, because you're not going to get experienced PlayStation developers because the PlayStation didn't exist. So the best way was to have our own guys retrain and acquaint themselves with the new hardware. Pretty much the same as going from the Spectrum to the Amiga. I mean, we didn't get different engineers in or different artists in. They just evolved and grew with the machines, and the same with the PlayStation. But full disclosure, it was at that point, about a year before the release of PlayStation, I left Ocean. So I was no longer involved in the licensing. I helped start up a game studio with a record company called Telstar, and we started straight away in developing a PlayStation game, which was called Lone Soldier, which was actually one of the first third-party games released for the PlayStation.
Lone Soldier. Now, Telstar had a very brief dalliance with video games back in the Atari 2600 days. Was there any kind of
Did they? I didn't even know that. Are
Oh
you
yeah.
sure?
Oh yeah.
Same company?
Same company. It was the music people, and they thought this was an extension of 8 tracks, and they had these cartridges that had 2 games on them where you just were going to flip it over. That was going to be their selling point. And
I maybe because Telstar specialized in music compilations, and
yeah,
maybe it was their philosophy for the video games back in those days. I was unaware of that. I didn't realize. But no,
yeah,
the Telstar Electronic Studios was born as a developer publisher. So that was a big sea change. The music industry at that point was really heading downhill with Napster and all of
yeah,
the streaming stuff going on. So they were looking for another revenue stream. Video games seemed the right way to go. What they didn't realize is they were just joining video games when the development budgets were going from 5 figures to 7 figures. And that was a huge jump. I mean, the commitment was enormous. But we did okay, and Lone Soldier did okay. It wasn't the best game in the world. Certainly wasn't the worst. It was a good game, and it was one of the first, as I say, first third-party games to be released on the platform, which I was quite proud of.
yeah. I have to admit, I'm not familiar with the game. Did it get a release outside of Europe?
I don't know.
I'm
I don't
seeing
know. I
it.
think we had some partnerships. We didn't publish directly in the US. We had some partnerships to publish our games in the US later on. But Lone Soldier was one of our first games, and I don't think we would have had a publisher for that. I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Yeah, because I'm just looking it up here on Moby Games. There's an ad that has a Konami distribution logo on it.
Oh, maybe. I mean, I
Yeah.
knew the Konami pretty well. I just don't remember. I'm sorry. I mean, it's
Oh, no problem.
35 years
Yeah.
ago. It's
No, I totally get it. It's just it's just one of those games that it didn't pop up in my. Yeah, and they did the distribution for Germany. So this is a German ad for the
it's a
game.
German game. Yeah, because
Okay.
Telstar just distributed in the UK. So they leveraged their European partners from the record side to publish in Europe. I don't know about the US though.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any reviews from U.S. magazines, so that would
Yeah.
indicate that it was only in Europe. That's why I'm not familiar with the title. So,
No, okay.
okay, I'll have to definitely look it up. So you're at Telstar, and I do have to ask, like you said, it was Telstar was already a media company with in the recording business. Uh, was it seen as an independent entity because you said they were already
Yeah.
leveraging their distribution?
Telstar was the largest independent record publisher in Europe. They were huge. Not only they were known primarily for compilations, but they also had some significant acts of their own. Like Craig David was on their label, Connor Reeves, Patricia McNeil, and Sync, which Alicia Dixon was with. So there were quite a few. Not in Sync. Sorry, Mystique, I think. Sorry,
Okay.
entirely different. But it was around that period. But yeah, they were a big record company. But as I say, the music industry was struggling a little. They were looking for another revenue stream. They got into video games. I think the budgets then got so high, and it wasn't just the number of people you had to develop, but also everyone had to get these silicon graphics computers in, which were thousands and thousands of pounds, plus more thousands of pounds for the software, and it became a little bit rich. It was difficult. We never really had a massive hit. We did pretty well. We licensed South Park in the first season, which was good, but Yeah, we just eventually the company was sold to Take-Two, Rockstar. So there was a reasonable ending to it, but that was the end of that. It was a good 5 years though.
Cool. Now, with and I think that that's probably a good place for us to pause here before we move on to the next goal. Now, the one thing I do have to ask, because, and I'm just looking through the catalog of games that were released by Telstar in this period, and most of them have both PlayStation and DOS ports, it looks like, with a couple of DOS exclusives or Windows exclusives like Fable and so forth. And I'm wondering, from a development and also from a marketing standpoint, uh, was it always seen as the console version is the big important one with the
Yeah,
PC just sort of thrown in because you've got the code laying around? What was
yeah.
that the view?
I think so. I mean, at the time, and again, if memory serves, those were the only two games formats. There was PlayStation and PC. There might have been a Sega one as well, but in
Yeah.
fact there was. I'm sure there was Dreamcast or something. But it was just PC was the only computer. We didn't really bother with Mac because although there were plenty of Mac users, they weren't used so much for games. They were more productivity. So PC graphics cards were improving a lot. The likes of Nvidia and Radeon, they were doing well. With the graphics and the sound. So those are the only competitive formats where we could emulate, if you like, the performance of a console for gaming. And so where we did them on PC, but those were very much the secondary formats, I think.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Now, the move from cartridges to CDs, uh, you're still having uh, you're still having to order the CDs through Sony, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And they're still doing some quality control and so forth to make sure everything works.
Still doing the approvals, yeah.
Yeah, but you don't necessarily have the same cost of materials as with a cartridge, or was the licensing fee just high enough to basically replace that?
Yeah, they didn't charge us for the CD. There was a hefty charge for the CD and the box and everything else. They publicly prepared everything. They manufactured everything, and there was a cost to that. So it wasn't. We didn't just pay for the raw goods. There was quite a chunk on top. But I think that was how they made money.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And did that? What I mean, was it as I'm trying to get to, I guess, the question of, was the risk factor in the PlayStation days of a failed program as bad as it was with a failed NES or Super NES?
No, I think part of that risk was mitigated by the fact that all the Nintendo cartridges were manufactured in Japan. So we had an import issue as well on top of the cost of the cartridge. So Sony, I think, manufactured them more locally. They had plants all over the world. So you didn't have the importation duties that you would have with the cartridges. So I don't think the risk was as high. Um, but again, I imagine there was a minimum quantity you had to order. I don't recall exactly,
No,
but
of
but I
course, yeah.
think I think there was that. So there was certainly a significant risk.
Gotcha. Also, and this is just from a mechanical standpoint, if a game did well and sold out, or you needed to order new ones, was that a process that was relatively quickly done? Because I
Yeah,
know with cartridges, that was always one of the big nightmares that,
yeah, that was a reordering. You had to
yeah.
wait and wait. No, the disc. I mean, you might struggle around the holiday season where they've got massive demand, but outside of that, I don't think there were any
Gotcha.
issues. Cool.
Okay, good. And so Telstar, you stay there for 5 years,
Mm.
you said, and is that when they wind down the company, or do you find another opportunity while it's still running?
As I say, they sold the company to Take-Two.
Yeah.
Um, and I went off with the senior engineer, a chap called Keith Goss. I had an idea to start a new company, a technology company, and I went off and funded my own company called Digimask, which was a 3D face company. It was like 25 years ahead of its time, but it was. I mean, do you want me to go into this, or is this
Well,
for
tell you what, let's use that as the springboard for our next conversation, if you're
okay,
okay with another conversation.
one more? Yeah.
One,
Okay.
oh, okay, no, and I don't want to outstay my welcome.
No,
That's
that's
fine.
fine. I mean, I honestly, Carl, I don't like talking about myself. That's the thing. But maybe for the history books, it's quite good, and I am proud of what I achieved with Digimask. So it would be nice to
I,
talk a little about that.
and it's like this. I'm not one of those people who just wants to talk about the reminiscing. I'd love to see, because video games and computer games touch on so many different technologies, music, sound, and
Yes.
everything else. I have met so many people who leave the computer game industry, but then end up with these amazing careers otherwise in tech.
Yes.
Because if you can make a video game, there is no software you cannot make.
No, that's
And
right.
and and just learning how people interact with technology. Video games is the ultimate interaction with technology.
It is. It is.
So,
It's
at
very
that
true.
point,
Yeah.
seeing where people end up afterwards is almost more fascinating than the video game side of it. Okay, recording is in progress. So, Digimasks, you're going now to it's a startup, it's new technology. Give me a rundown of what the product was intended to be, and what the business model for it was.
Sure. Well, what happened was at the end of when Telstar was sold, um, I came up with this idea of personalizing games. And you've got to remember, this was just at the very, very start of digital photographs. I mean, they weren't on phones or anything. There were no cameras on phones. They were these big cameras with floppy disk drives in them, but they were digital. And it was the new way of storing, of capturing and storing photo data. So I thought, wouldn't it be neat if you could put yourself in the game as the character? And the way to do that was, I believed, creating a three-dimensional model of your head. Now we could capture it digitally in photograph form, some way of creating, of transforming those 2D images into a 3D moving animated model. So I had a really great genius guy who was who an engineer who worked with me at Telstar, and I brought him in as my co-founder and said, "Okay, here's my idea. Can you do this?" And he said, "Well, yeah, I can do the prototype and whatnot." So we started developing a prototype. It's quite an interesting story, actually. So I didn't have an awful lot of money, so I was just funding basically the two of us. I funded Keith. His name was Keith Goss, and myself. I did a little bit of consultancy, and in fact, I did some consultancy because I've been doing a lot of licensing for Ocean. I was doing licensing consultancy for Take-Two. I developed a relationship with Take-Two, and they
Oh,
were doing a lot of hardware, joysticks and stuff like that. And I got them the license for Manchester United football team and all that. And one day, and I was always keeping up with trends. And one day I called the CEO and I said, "Look, there's a great license here. I think you should get it for video games. I think it could be pretty big. It's not very well known at the moment, but I think it's going to explode. And they looked at it and they said, no, we're not interested. And I looked into it, and it was a relatively low cost license. But they said no, they weren't very keen. That license was something called Harry Potter.
Oh, Jesus. Oh.
So a swing and a miss. What a shame. But anyway, we all know what became of that. So I was doing consultancy. There's a little bit of a personal story behind all this as well. So funding myself, funding Keith, and Keith was working away on the prototype of Digimask. And the concept was that we would allow people to upload their front photograph and their side photograph, and we would create a 3D model of their head. So he was developing the prototype. I was speaking to Chris Deering at Sony, who was the head of Sony at that time, PlayStation, and they were very, very interested in it because they were looking at developing a digital camera for the PlayStation, the original PlayStation. I've forgotten what it was.
Oh.
iToy it was called, and that was further off. So we were looking ahead, and these things could be useful. So I was doing this, and obviously, like all software development, it was slow. It was running slow. This was in 1999, and towards the end of the 1999, I was running out of money. It was getting very, very tough. The prototype wasn't ready. Chris Deering said, as soon as you got the prototype, show me, and we'd be really interested. Waiting for the prototype, and it gets to November, December, and my wife started feeling very, very ill. And she had tests, and she was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease, which is lymph-based cancer. So we were getting towards the end of the year. She had to go in just before Christmas for a biopsy, and we had to wait until the new year for the results. So this was a nightmare. And in the meantime, I'm running out of money, about to lose the house. So you're talking about rock bottom. Here we are. I'm looking at the millennium. It was December 1999. Everyone's partying. And I was in the depths of depression because I'm thinking, I'm going to lose my wife, going to lose my house, I'm going to bring up the two kids by myself. These are the possible scenarios you look at. And it was the most miserable time ever. January comes, and she's diagnosed, and the biopsy comes through, and it was curable, and it could be treated and everything else. And just to by the by, she's fine, and that was 25 years ago, and everything's fine. But we didn't know that at the time, but she was fine. So that was a weight off my mind. In January, Keith finished the prototype, and we started going around and trying to raise funds. And in February, I raised £5 million, which was an awful lot of money back then.
Yeah.
So everything was good, and I was able to sell some of my shares. So not only did I keep hold of the house, but at that point I was able to pay off the mortgage. So it was a complete 180
Wow.
whole turnaround. So there's a little bit of a personal story there, which was great. So what we had was a prototype technology, whereby photo of your face, photo of your side, and you upload it, and you didn't actually upload it because the internet was really, really slow then. I think the fastest speed was ISDN, so it wasn't practical. So we did. I brought on, with the funds we got, I put together a development team, got some really, really clever guys. One guy, Daryl, was his expertise, his engineering expertise, was in radar technology. So he applied his skills to identifying all of the features on the face of a photograph. And therefore, we could then imbue virtual muscles in the face and make it smile and pull faces and everything else, because we knew where the eyes were, the mouth, the nose, everything else. So this was seriously groundbreaking. I mean, you're talking about 25 years ago. This was seriously groundbreaking technology. So I then did a deal with Matrox, who are big graphics card company, and they, because obviously they were promoting 3D graphics on their cards, and they had the software on the installation discs of their graphics cards. I did a deal with Kodak, the big camera company, who were doing the way you would get your digital photographs is on CD-ROM. So they would put our software on the CD-ROM, and people could make their 3D heads. And we had a little kit which, animated your face and did whatnot. And then we went forward, and, maybe a year later, we had this super technology. And I started licensing it to games companies, so you could put yourself in Rainbow Six and be one of the soldiers in Rainbow Six on the PlayStation. We licensed it to Sony with the iToy. It was one of the added things on iToy. And then as phones came out, the iPhone was released with cameras, etc., then we were able to really, really fly with the software. And I did licenses with Disney and the British government for, excuse me, and the British government had an amazing application which we developed. And what they do is they'd have a demo pod with cameras going around the country to schools. And the kids would troop in to a bus, right? This bus was decked out, cameras and the software. And they go into the bus, they'd have their photos taken. And then in a couple of minutes, it generated their 3D head. And they would choose cocaine or crystal meth or these drugs. And they'd press the button. There was a third one as well. And they pressed the button and they could see their face deteriorate, and they show the effects of what that particular drug would have. So with cocaine, for instance, you'd lose your philtrum and you'd get the hole in your nose and everything. And crystal meth was the worst because your teeth would go all brown.
Oh,
and you
yeah.
get big bags and you get sunken face. And of course, it was all animated and moving, so it was real. And it had a huge effect because obviously kids are very, very image
Visual.
conscious.
Yeah.
So anything that affected their appearance was effective, and these things were great. We did licenses with Disney, which promoted their movies. So online, I remember the first one was a movie called Enchanted, with the princess. It was a sort of animation stroke live action. And what they do is you could upload your photos and you would be in a scene from the movie that you could then download and watch as the main character. And it was quite funny. And I learned something very, very fundamental at that point that I've taken with me there on. And that is, a lot of people are stupid, right? They don't read instructions. So the instructions for Digimask was you had to have, a bit like a passport, you had to have a neutral expression. So, no glasses, neutral expression, front and side, and that was it. Hair off your ears and all this. So we did this Enchanted thing, and the promotion worked well, but Disney got back to us and said, look, we're only getting a 50% hit rate. Only 50% of the uploads are actually generating into the promotion. So we investigated it and we looked at the photographs. What people had done, it was mostly for girls because it was all about princess and things. What they'd done is, rather than reading the thing and neutral expression, they were going to studios because, of course, they believed that the head of Walt Disney might see these photos and want their child to be in a movie. And so they would be going to studios, and there'd be, soft focus studio shots of girls like that, and posing and everything else, and they just weren't appropriate for the software. They just didn't work. So I got back to Disney, and they changed the instructions and made sure it was. But stuff like that, and it made me realise, and it sort of gave us a good test for the future of the software, because we had to compensate for those things. So we did an awful lot, and it was groundbreaking. And we're talking about, the early 2000s, and this is, phones started getting cameras, and it was all very accessible to everyone. And it was the beginning of the me era where people were doing selfies and all that stuff. So it was all about themselves. And the games were flying. We were doing, Konami did an awful lot with us. EA did it with F1 racing. So you could put yourself in games. And then people were posting videos online of themselves in a game and Rainbow Six. And they probably still exist, actually, somewhere. And it was great. And then we found that rather than the whole concept was for video games, right, to put yourself in games. But we found as time went on that marketing was the big. Oh, the other big one we did was with Universal Pictures, because I had all these contacts with the movie companies. They were promoting Hulk, the Hulk movie, and what you could do is use the Digimask, and you would turn yourself into the Hulk. You would become the Hulk, and you'd
Cool.
turn green and it was amazing. And I may have samples somewhere that I can send you a little videos.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, please. I'd love to see it.
I'll have a look through. So it was all really, really good. However, the recession hit in 2000. Mhm.
08, 09.
0809. And the first things that were hit were marketing budgets, and that hit us really, really badly. So, it made it difficult to expand, and we had to lay some people off. And of course, with a cutting edge technology, you need to keep iterating and developing as technology progresses, and, cameras were getting more powerful and more detailed and more high definition, and we couldn't keep up with it. And we kept it going up until about 2012. So we got 12 years of it, and it was a great business. It's still sitting there, but of course, unless you're able to update it and iterate it, it becomes outdated. But I would say, even today, as far as I've seen, there is no technology yet that's doing. I strongly believe if we'd have continued with it, it would have been the biggest thing out there in terms of personalization, because it worked. But people are still struggling with that concept. I think AI is helping an awful lot, and with deep fakes and things like that. So
True.
it is sort of happening now in a different way, technically. But I was so proud of it. I mean, it was an amazing business, and it did really, really well while it was flourishing. But sadly, all things come to an end. And again, one of the things, when I was raising money in the early days, in 1990, in 2000, I was going around to VCs, and it was only British, English VCs I was going to see. And because I was looking at this as becoming a web-based application, although there were a number of VCs who were canny about the web, the number of companies, there was one guy who said the internet is a fad, and it'll be gone in 2 or 3 years. It was incredible, the ignorance. The difficulty is this country has always been notoriously bad for investment in tech. There are obviously exceptions, but by and large, we didn't have a Silicon Valley like you have in the US, and I have no doubt if we'd have been in the US, this would have been much, much bigger. But you're limited geographically, I guess. We had the greatest engineers. The talent we had was brilliant, but it was just the sort of commercial environment, the financial environment of this country is not terribly conducive to innovation. Or it hasn't been. Maybe it is now. So that was it. So that was the Digimask story, and I've got lots of videos. I've still got the software, and it still actually works. I tried it a couple of months ago on my PC, and it still works.
Now, when you guys were licensing this out and I guess we need to divide it into two segments for PC for gaming. When you're licensing the tech out, are you just licensing out a finished package that they have to implement, or is it like you guys sending your team over to the development studio to show them how to integrate it, writing new code?
Yeah.
How does that work?
It goes back to something you asked before, the business model. nothing like this existed, and I had to come up with a business model that worked. The first stage was just giving it away for free and trying to get massive adoption as much as you could. So what I ended up doing was creating a licensing model whereby we would provide the SDK and sell the SDK, a little like Epic, the Unreal Engine, and who I had a great relationship with, and we did a lot of work with Epic as well and Unreal. So that was the sort of licensing model, because there was nothing like this that was around. So we had to sort of invent it, and it worked. It worked great. So and there were plans to do a new type of business further in the future, which never came to light, which never materialized. But I had plans for various stages of the technology. So that was it. We would license the SDK. They would implement it into the game. So, for instance, in Rainbow Six, they would have, at the beginning of the game, you have the customization where you can do your face. Well, it had an additional one whereby you could upload your photo if you had an iToy, which was the camera for the PlayStation, and then it would create your head, which would then import into the game. So that's what we would do with companies like Disney, for instance, and doing that web promotion for Enchanted and Pirates of the Caribbean. We did as well. Then quite often we do it for them. So we had a small subset of the development team who would actually do some of the bigger projects themselves.
Gotcha. Now, and so when you're doing this implementation now for the games, the SDK, I'm guessing it's a relatively flat fee up front. You're not getting a percentage of sales of the software or anything like that, right?
We tried. It was, do you know? I remember it was, and it was a flat fee, but we're talking about a six-figure sum, which back in the early 2000s was very nice. And those are the sort of fees we were getting. Yes, I mean ultimately, the objective was to get the user to pay an annual subscription, so they'd have free access to all of these things. And obviously the sales element then will be convincing the games companies and the movie companies and everything else to implement the software free of charge into their project, into their applications. And that was going to be the next stage of business, but that never actually materialized.
Gotcha. And the marketing stuff where you guys are creating an app or an implementation of the software for a very specific marketing campaign, I'm guessing those were definitely flat fees, right?
Yes. We actually produced a piece of software. Hold on one second.
Okay. He's going to come back as the Hulk, everybody.
Hold on. Yeah, you can pause at this point. Let me just find. I thought I had it. No, sorry. I have got it somewhere, and I'll dig it out and find it for you. But it was a DVD box with a DVD in it, or a CD-ROM, or whatever it was, and we launched a product called Head Wizard. And what it would do is it allowed you to, put in your photos and generate your head, and then create funny GIFs and things like that you could then use in your emails for your signature. And a lot of people did use it. Small GIFs, large GIFs, and it was great. And your eyes could pop out of your head, and it would distort your face, and it was real fun. And that was an application we sold for about £15, 15 euros. And I got worldwide distribution on that. So we did our own little piece of software, but I didn't really want to publish it. So there were a few things, we were able to commercialize.
Gotcha. And it almost seems too bad, because with 3D printing coming up shortly after that, this would have been an interesting implementation.
That was going to be another part of the business as well. Yeah, linking up with a 3D company, or generating a 3D file for your laser printer. Yeah, 3D
Gotcha.
printer. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I just pulled up the archive.org version of the website, and it's got some fun GIFs here
Yeah.
of stuff. I'll link all this in the show notes.
Oh,
Uh,
great.
oh no,
Actually,
definitely. I mean,
can you send me the link? Actually, I haven't.
yeah,
So
here.
the Digimask site is still there, is it?
Well, it's on archive.org. So
Oh, okay.
archive.org is basically they try to store the web, and they've been doing it for 20 plus years. So you can actually see different iterations of the website at different points in time.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. I'm
Now
just
I'm not sure.
looking.
Not all the links will actually work, um, but yeah, there's a whole bunch of fun stuff here.
And it says the second one that comes up is Digimask Head Wizard, which was that software I mentioned.
Yeah, yeah, no, and it's yeah, I mean it's very interesting to see, and uh, yeah, this would have been a cool technology. I was not aware of this at all at the time. This is the kind of thing that I would have, yeah, I definitely would have liked to have played with.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I still get people pinging me and telling me they've still got their Digimask from all those years ago.
oh, there's the Hulk is on here too. You can see the Hulk animation.
Oh, good. Is
Yeah,
it is
it's
it
on there.
animated?
Yeah, yeah, it's a little low grade version of it, but you can see definitely see how it works and what it does and stuff. That's the Ang Lee Hulk movie.
That's
Uh,
the one. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh, very cool. So, okay, so you've got this tech. Now I do have to ask, and this is the lawyer in me, did you get any patents on any of this stuff?
We did, yes. We did do some patents, and there was a company in New York, an infamous company called Citric, or it was an individual, and he was known as a patent troll, and he uh, registered so many patents for this type of thing. Didn't have the technology, just as ideas, and we went through a bit of a legal process with that, but we won. Um,
Mhm.
uh, but I think the patents expired now. Um, but it
Hmm.
was, yeah, back in the day, it was because it was complete innovation. It was totally.
Yeah. No, no. I mean, and I can imagine that, yeah, that would have been at least somebody trying to use the 3D system. I mean, nowadays, 3D scanning with your phone is a common
Yes.
tool.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is way, way ahead of its time.
Yeah. We were too early, but
Yeah.
we still did okay.
Yeah, not if the house is paid for. Okay, come
Yeah,
on.
that's
The
right.
house is paid for.
And then some. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay, so after we've got a situation where the economic downturn caused by the housing market in the US is going on. You've got the company has to lay people off. There's not that much demand for the product any longer. Where do you turn next?
Um, well, I always had the fallback of video games. So I'm trying to think of timeframes now. Um, I was approached by a company called Kuju um, to help with the development, and they were doing they were a freelance company, a large freelance company, games development company that would often do ports for big companies. They did a lot for Nintendo, Ubisoft, Activision, all the big names, and they asked me to come in and look after the development for a while, which I did. Um, and enjoyed that. And
What were some of the titles you worked on while you were there?
there, there was some of the Rabbids games from
Oh,
Ubisoft. Um,
okay.
the guys came up with Art Studio for Nintendo. So there were a number of Art Studio, no Art Studio. I think it was called Art Studio. The it was a painting application. It was
Hmm.
amazing. Um, we did that. Do you know, I'm really, really fuzzy. We did a number of ports for Activision. They did a lot of the karaoke type games.
Hmm.
Um, SingStar, and not SingStar, that was Sony. Uh, do you know, my memory's so fuzzy.
They
But
was it an American Idol game?
I think they did an American Idol game, yeah. I think there was oh God, do you know, there were so many. I can look it up in
Hmm.
the archives, but it was, I've been involved with so many games. It's just difficult
And oh no, I totally
to
get it. I
remember.
totally get it.
Uh,
Uh, oh
yeah,
yeah, I'm looking here. There seems to be a whole bunch of them where
yeah.
your name, at least on Moby Games, your name is showing up as a thank you.
Oh, right.
Uh, there's a CMT presents Karaoke Revolution Country.
Yes, yes, that was one. Uh, there were lots of karaoke games. And there were themed ones
Hmm.
as well, like country and so on. No, karaoke Revolution Country was Digimask. That was Konami.
Ah,
You were
oh
in,
that, yeah.
that was a Digimask game.
Ah,
Mm,
cool.
yeah. That wasn't Kuju, I don't think. It might have been. I know, I don't. It wasn't. Dealt with Konami US with that. Um,
Hmm.
no, there was a whole series of them from Activision because they were doing Guitar Hero games and all those. There were dance games. There was, yeah, I just, I think they did a Grease, the movie Grease. I
Yeah.
think they did a Grease version of one of the karaoke. Uh,
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. I mean, everything after Guitar Hero came out, it was like,
yeah,
if you can associate with a music license, go for it.
that was it. That was it. No, and they were very successful. They did some great games, and again,
Hmm.
large talent pool of talent at Kuju.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at Kuju here. I mean, yeah, a lot of ports, some Java stuff, PlayStation 2 stuff, then Dark Messiah, Might and Magic, Dungeons and Dragons Tactics on the PSP, Rock Revolution, Railworks. Yeah, I mean, but yeah, if this is a company that was mainly doing ports, then
They did
yeah.
some original ones as well. Battalion Wars, um, Buzz the Sports Quiz. Oh, they did quizzes as well. I've got it up now. Fireblade for Nintendo. I think
Oh,
I think it was Nintendo. Um,
Fire
Narcos.
Emblem, you mean, or Fireblade?
No, Fireblade. Wish it
Hmm.
had been Fire Emblem. Would have been nice. Uh, but yeah, and Zumba. They got the license for Zumba and did
Zumba.
when Zumba the Keep Fit uh, protocol. It was really really popular back in the teens, the tweens, and they did a number of very successful Zumba games for what was the name of the company? It was based out in Jersey. Uh, can't remember.
Hmm.
Cannot remember. I'm sorry.
Zumba games.
Zumba games.
Oh Jesus. Oh my God. Just putting the name in, there's a lot of stuff that pops up. Okay, Zumba. Oh, now I remember this fad. Yeah, okay.
Zumba
Zumba
Fitness.
fitness thing.
And
This would
who
have been from
was
Majesco?
Majesco? That was it. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. They did a lot of work with Majesco, with Activision. They were the main clients, I believe.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, this is where you start getting into a part of the industry where that's when you realize just how many games come out every month.
Yeah, yeah. And what I did, they were strictly PC console. And I was very, very keen for the company to jump onto the uh, mobile smartphone bandwagon
Hmm.
for games apps. Um, but the CEO was reluctant. He's quite traditionalist in video games. It was Dominic Wheatley, from one of the founders of Domark. Um,
Oh.
and yeah, and then went on to do Tomb Raider and titles like that. And he wanted to stick to the the core. But he indulged me at one point. I found a great team who did a game which we ended up calling Crack Attack, and it was brilliant. It did really, really well for a number of years. It was a new type of match three game. It wasn't a match three. It was a total new game mechanic. Very, very clever, very innovative, and that had a pretty good shelf life and did really well, and great reviews, everything else. And then I licensed that to Cadbury's for Easter. So because the items in the game were eggs. So I said, oh, well, let's make them Easter eggs, chocolate eggs. And we did a bespoke version for Cadbury's, which they then marketed. And that really helped as well, because obviously there were in-app purchases, as well as them paying us to do this because it was marketing for them. So we had a pretty good life out of Crack Attack as well.
Nice. And so this is actually an interesting point, because that move to smartphones, and you mentioned it also with Digimask, that, you know, the convergence of those technologies, camera and everything else. From your point of view as someone who is, you know, supervising development, who's looking for development studios, looking for ideas, trying to stay on the edge of innovation on this, how did you see the market changing, or how did that change the way that you approached game development now, with, you know, having to do in-app purchases and stores and so forth? What were the skills that you had to learn anew?
Well, it was a completely different business model. You know, we were used to just selling games, you know, give you 20 euros or 50 euros or whatever it was, and you buy the game in a box, or even download it, maybe back then, I'm not sure. So in-app purchases was a totally different dynamic. The other thing that became really, really difficult was the sheer volume of new products that were being released every day, or at least every week. So you were talking about a really cluttered market, which then became a massive exercise in marketing. How do you get your product seen above all the noise? Apple, you had to cultivate a relationship with Apple to try and get on their new page. That was tough. Android didn't have anything like that. So it was all about user acquisition and paying for ads, and it was a totally different business model. I only sort of skirted it with Crack Attack, and fortunately the guys who were developing it were well versed in developing mobile games, so they knew what would work for in-app purchases, which again is a totally different philosophy within your game than just writing a game, and once someone's paid for it, you don't really care. Well, you do, but it doesn't matter if they get stuck or if they get frustrated or if they only play it for a few hours, because you got their money, and that was the attitude. Whereas with mobile games, you had to captivate them, you had to engage them, and you had to keep engaging them and keep them playing. And that's why Candy Crush was so successful, because they did it brilliantly. So there were many more challenges with in-app purchases. Of course, the rewards were potentially much higher. The cost of development itself wasn't terribly high, but you know, you just had to learn and iterate and get your head around all of these new dynamics, commercial dynamics that you weren't confronted with before with a game in a box. And it was a great learning experience. But as I say, the market got very, very cluttered, still is. And it is, I think, we're seeing a downturn in the games industry. Over the past few years, it's become a real struggle. And part of that is because of the in-app purchase thing, because, of course, that philosophy then went over to the traditional PC console games in a way, whereas, you know, they were subscription based and pay to play and whatever. And I think it's become very, very difficult for the consumer. And now that the consumer has a choice of so many different things to spend their time on. So whereas back in the old days, we were competing in Ocean, for instance, we were competing with Electronic Arts and these other companies to try and get our games sold. Now you're competing with YouTube, you're competing with Netflix, you're competing with all sorts of other digital entertainment sources with your game. So it's become much more challenging and much more difficult right now to be a games developer publisher. And only the very, very special few rise to the top and make a good amount of money. And we've seen that with a number of layoffs from large companies. And personally, and I know I shouldn't say this, I believe that there's been a lack of innovation in video game developments. Everything seems to be a Me Too. And as the budgets for consoles games got bigger and bigger, the large publishers were much more risk averse. And therefore, it was more a question of emulating the current popular genres and trying to make, a shoot 'em up on arena. You look at Rocket League. Was it Rocket League? That spawned a whole load of wannabes. That because everyone said, "Oh, we've got to do a Rocket League type game," and some of them were even more successful. Epic's game was huge, but yeah, there've been one or two exceptions, and I'll quote Portal as being one, which was really innovative. There was nothing else like it, and that's why it did so well. But the number of games that have been truly groundbreaking in terms of concept and mechanic are very few and far between. And I don't think games have evolved that much since Tomb Raider appeared on the PlayStation, the first 3D game, which was amazing for its day. It totally turned games on their heads because you couldn't have 3D prior to that. And since then, it's been quite samey, and that's a shame, really. I think that's why Balatro did pretty well, because again, it was innovative.
And well, there's another phenomenon which I guess has a little bit of a parallel with the latter days of the 8-bit computer age, which is nowadays every game seems to still be available 20 years later. So I mean, I can go on right now and, well, I could pay $60 for the latest new game, or I could buy a copy of GTA 5 for $5.
Yeah.
And I guess the parallel here, and we mentioned it briefly, but we didn't really talk about it. The re-releases, the budget re-releases, or bundles of games that were very popular starting really in 84, 85, because Woe Jolly got into that game when Imagine went belly up, of bundling a bunch of 1 or 2 year old titles together for almost the price of one new game. What effect does that have, or how are publishers viewing that when they're developing new games nowadays? And how did you guys, and does that compare, or how did it differ with how you guys viewed that bundling back in the Ocean days, for example?
Well, as I said, I think last time it was another string to the bow that games had a typical shelf life of a couple of months maximum, unless they were huge games. So it was another way. You'd have 3 shots, basically. You'd have the full game release, then you'd have the compilation release where it will be bundled, and then further down the line you'd have the budget release where the same game would be released at a fraction of the original price. And that was the way it went back in the 8-bit and 16-bit days. These days they don't really have that. I see you can subscribe, as you know, to Microsoft, to Xbox, and you get all your games free. it's not free because you pay a subscription, but that's their way of monetizing older product, and that seems to work well. But they do it with some new product as well, depending on the level of membership you have, and that's a good way of doing it. But I don't know. I think the problem with that, speaking as a developer, is how do you get your royalty worked out from that? How do you monetize that royalty wise as a developer? So if I do a deal to sell to a publisher and that publisher ends up including it in their bundle, in their subscription, how is that monetized to me in terms of the royalty? I don't know, because I haven't been involved in the games business since that particular business model has been adopted. But I think that's why a number of companies have gone out of business, because they're just not getting the royalties that they used to get if their game was successful.
Makes perfect sense. And so that does bring us to the issue now. After Cujo, was it Cujo or
Cujo.
Cujo.
Kuju. Kuju.
It's not the dog from the Stephen King movie. Okay.
No, no. It was a rabid game, yeah.
Why do you leave there, and where do you go?
Why did I leave? I actually don't recall. I remember, I do remember, again, business was getting tough. The large companies who we were dealing with were starting to do those products and those ports in-house. So the business was drying up a little. It was getting very competitive. The company itself was focusing more. It had a really great games testing and translation arm to it, and that became more of the focus of the overall business. And so as the development side started waning a little bit and it started getting tough to get the contracts, then I decided that, it wasn't. I've always had this philosophy that I'll always work somewhere where I'm enjoying it. Once I stop enjoying it, then really that's the end for me and time to move on to something else. And so I started up. I did a little bit of consultancy. I started up another business called Peel Zone, which wasn't really technology, but it was in a way, and that was. Totally different. This was hardware, although there was a software element. Phones were obviously getting increasingly popular. Everyone had a smartphone at this point, and I'm talking about maybe 2014, 15, and again, I've always been keen on personalization. How do you personalize? So what I wanted, people were making covers for phones. That you could choose, a piece of artwork or a logo or whatever, and customize your phone. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if you could customize it with a picture of your family or whatever on the back of the phone? And so I commissioned a development company to develop a web application that would allow you to upload graphics, use fonts, write what you want, and do, and then put it onto a template of the 50 most popular phones. So I would get the 50 most popular phones, the templates, the dimensions, the holes for the cameras and all that stuff. And then you would design your thing on the template of the phone you had, and then upload it, pay your $10 or whatever it was, and you would get your decal. And it was this beautiful vinyl made by 3M, that you'd apply to the phone, and it would be lovely. And the idea was that you get sick of it in 3 months and you'd buy a new one, and so you'd churn it over, and that did well. And I even did a big approached Activision for a promotion, and they ordered X 100,000 Call of Duty PS4 iPhone only. It was just the latest iPhone, and they were either giving them away or selling them. I don't remember. So that was a nice little business, and I had a deal with a printing company locally, and they bought this special printer, which was very, very expensive, that printed on this vinyl, this special vinyl adhesive stuff. And they went on to use it for other things. They were very, very happy with that acquisition because it gave them an in with other businesses. So I did that for a couple of years, and that was successful, but it wasn't where my heart was, and I carried on doing a little bit of consultancy. By this time, I was just slowing down a little and wanted to take it easy a little. And that's when I had my meeting with Jawad, guy who got in touch with me. Someone had recommended he contact me. He was based in Dubai. I can't remember whether I told this story.
No.
Okay, so he was based in Dubai. He was doing VR games. He was developing VR games. He'd been very, very successful, serial entrepreneur, been very successful in various businesses in tech, more latterly doing games, and had decided to go into VR. I'd been doing a lot in China with games companies, and he wanted someone who could help them with global distribution and global publishing, which I'd had a little experience with. So we arranged to meet, and he flew over from Dubai, and we met in a car park in a place called Slough, which is not terribly salubrious. Apologies to anyone from Slough who's watching this. And we started chatting about potentially publishing his VR games, but we started talking about where VR could go. And that's when we sort of hit upon what became known as the metaverse. And with all entertainment becoming much more accessible digitally, it was, well, why don't we someone should create a world where everyone is an avatar. They can go into this world with their avatar, meet their friends, and then go to room X and see the latest Manchester United football game, or go to room Y and play Call of Duty with their friends. And it would all be from this central virtual hub. Originally, the concept was with VR goggles, but as it iterated and made it a lot more 2D. And you could buy assets and do out your own home, your own man cave or person cave, as it was, and you could do it up with all sorts. And we did some incredible stuff. So, and this was on the foundation of crypto, on blockchain, and we did an ICO to raise money for it, an internal coin offering, because crypto was becoming very popular then. We thought, oh, this is a nice way to raise money, and it was. So we raised money, but unlike a lot of companies who were raising money just to raise money and depart, we wanted to deliver the vision, and we put everything into the company. And this was very innovative as well. We got into NFTs, but I was still licensing, and I got a license from Paramount, and we licensed Godfather, and we licensed all these amazing movies, and we went on to license Top Gun and Godzilla, and we'd have these amazing 3D animated monsters and whatever that you would have in your room, and you could bring your friends in and show them off. And then they're still developing now the hub where you could go. I was meeting with Universal Music to see if we could create virtual concerts, and so you could attend a live concert from your desk or living room or whatever, and that's yet to be done. No one's really done it yet, but we were creating this, and it's still being created. I stepped away 2 or 3 years ago because I was just burning out. I was getting older a bit. There was an awful lot of travel. I was traveling to Korea, then US, then UK, then Korea, and I was going all over the world, and it was killing me. The stress was killing me, and I just had to say, look, I just can't do this any longer. All my life, all my career, I've been genuinely, I don't mean to sound pretentious here, but I've been running at a sprint, and never knowing what I'd be doing next year, because everything has been so uncertain, because we didn't know whether video games were going to last, and even if they were, whether the company you're with going to last or whatever. Everything's so uncertain. When you're in a hits-driven business, that lack of security is part of what you've got to deal with, and it was exhausting me. And so I got to the point where I said, look, I've got to step away now. Having said that, I'm still involved with a few companies and got to keep this going, but more on an advisory and mentoring basis than actual. I invest as well. I invest in businesses. I've invested in a video games company recently as well, called Ace High Sports. They've got a great concept. But quite a diverse portfolio of investments, and I'm really enjoying life now. We're traveling. Used to travel a lot for business. When you're traveling for pleasure, it's very, very different. We're traveling a lot now. I'm living on the same road pretty much as all three of my kids and their kids. And we see our family every day, and absolutely loving life. Really, really living life.
That sounds ideal. What's the name of the company that's developing the virtual environments?
It was launched as Terra Virtua, which was Virtual Earth, and then there was a company in crypto called Terra something or other, and they were a scam and conned loads of people. And of course, our name was similar, and we didn't want to be confused, so we cut the name down to Virtua. And so it was virtua.com, which I think is still going. But then when I left and Jawad took over as CEO, he renamed the company Vanar, Vanar.
Gotcha.
And they're focusing an awful lot on blockchain technology and creating amazing, fast and very, very cheap blockchain transactions through their own blockchain, which will then be the feeder and serve the bigger picture of what we originally conceived.
Gotcha. Very interesting. And so I guess that brings us to today. And I have one final question then. This is a final question I ask all of my interview subjects. It's a two-parter. Looking back at your career, what is one development in the video game industry that you thought was going to be huge that ended up going nowhere? And what was one development that became huge that you did not see coming?
Yeah. Well, the one that I didn't, I'll go the other opposite way. The one we didn't expect to be as big was video games. When we got into video games, it was just we were hoping to get maybe 5 years out of it, because many things in technology are fads. They're fashion driven, and video games. I'm certain everyone who got into video games in the early 80s probably didn't think or didn't expect it to have not just the life it had, but the successful life, that it would actually be greater than every other entertainment industry in terms of revenues that existed: music, movies, TV, the lot. So that was the big one. That was the big pleasant surprise. The one I thought would take off but didn't, I guess the one I was disappointed with, I'm not sure whether I was fully convinced it would work, but the one I was disappointed with because I put a lot into it was VR. Was hoping that would work. I think that was more of a hope than an expectation, because we were looking at that. I personally was never a fan. It always made me sick. And so I tried. Some of the experiences were wonderful, and I'm sure there will be good applications further on. But the one, I guess, the one that I thought would be good were these smart glasses, and they will come back in some other form, I'm sure.
Mm.
But when Google Smart Glass, wasn't it, was
Yeah.
released, I thought that was the start of a major innovation. And it didn't happen. The other one I thought were video phones that sort of Amstrad and companies like that brought
Mm.
out. Little screen with your phone, didn't work, and then we leapfrogged that whole technology, and now we're walking around with portable ones. So that was something that I don't think many people saw coming. Uh, Technology in the time I've been involved with technology since the beginning of the 80s, it's just been an exponential change. I mean, things it's been science fiction made real. We didn't have smartphones, we didn't have computers back when I was younger. All of these changes have happened, and the rate of those changes are always exponential. And obviously, the next big thing, which is now, is AI. And I was talking to someone who's really ensconced in that particular industry, and he was saying that AI is going to be optimal in 3 years. And people are talking about, it's going to take 10 years for it to be truly, he's saying 3 years because of the exponential rate of advancement. But the thing that concerns me, as it did about blockchain and now concerns me about AI, are the environmental factors. Because
Mm.
obviously all these things take an awful lot of power, and that power's got to come
Yeah.
from somewhere. And that's a serious concern.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of people who work on the ethics side of that equation, and ultimately, the question is how much of our water supply do we want to destroy so somebody can generate a picture of a sexually attractive My Little Pony? I don't know if that's really necessary.
Good example.
Oh, believe me, this is the clean version. The one I use
Yeah,
in
I'm
class
sure.
is much worse.
No, I get the point, and
Yeah.
it is a concern. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. We'll have to see how it develops and how many hundreds of thousands of dollars OpenAI can lose per day before they finally have to close their doors.
yeah.
Uh,
Well, there's plenty of other people ready to step into their place. So Gemini's working, and Google, loads of them.
Meta, everybody. I mean,
Yeah,
Amazon is betting the farm on it. I mean, if it doesn't pan out, they're going to. That's a business model that's going to really hit the skids.
yeah. But
Um,
where does it go? Because so many jobs will be replaced by that. Whether it's we're talking about doctors with the combination of robotics as well, and something being able to operate on you, etc. But purely digitally, then where are people going to get the money to pay for all of these? Because there won't be the jobs out there.
My problem with it is a technical one, and I mean, I'm no disparagement on your source about 3 years, but AI models, LLMs, large language models, have the same problem that quantum computing has. And this is why quantum computing has always been the technology that's 5 years away for the last 25 years.
Yeah,
Uh, because what it does is it produces a whole bunch of possible answers. You know one of them's correct, but you don't know which one.
one.
LLMs have the same problem. It'll give you an answer, but you cannot rely on that answer being correct.
No,
The reason the spreadsheet, VisiCalc, became the thing that made computers useful was you could rely on its calculations every time.
yes,
It saving you work, but giving you work you can't rely on is not saving you work. And I think that all the predictions, now there's a bunch of companies laying people off trying to implement AI. The problem is it's all going to backfire. And what I'm afraid of is that with people like Trump in power, conservative governments elsewhere, governments trying to save money on things like medical costs, they're going to rely on these tools to create diagnoses. They're going to cut back on things like education for the professionals that could actually do the job. And we're going to have in 10 to 15 years' time, suddenly a bunch of people retiring because the baby boomers are going.
Yeah.
Not enough new qualified people coming up through the ranks. And we're all going to be sitting there on cost structures to finance care that were built around the idea of cheap AI. And as soon as companies like OpenAI and stuff have to shut down because the business model does not work,
It's a
suddenly
vacuum.
the AI that is available will be super expensive. Raising the budgets again to be able to pay for the healthcare will not be tenable. And even if you did have the money, the people will not have been trained to do the job.
No.
That's that perfect storm that's about 15 to 20 years away, just when I get old enough to have to go to the doctor every day, that I'm afraid of. Okay.
Yeah, I'm too old to worry about it. I'm not going to be around, but I do worry for my family.
Yeah.
For my kids, my grandkids, particularly. I have no idea what sort of world they're going to grow up in, and I don't want to end this on doom and gloom.
No, well,
It's depressing.
it's kind of a sign of the time. Now, tell it. Okay, wait. One big question,
Go.
and I'm going to go old school. Looking at your time at Ocean, of all the games that you were involved with, if you had to pick one of them to boot up right now and play, which one would it be?
The one I enjoyed playing the most was Adam's Family. It was such a beautifully designed game. It was a platform game. It was, it wasn't the most innovative game in the world, but it was so playable. I love that. And there were games like that that I used to go back to play because I actually enjoyed them a lot. There were a couple of others like Arkanoid, and there was a coin-op conversion called Slap Fight, which I loved. Or
Oh, yeah.
But I think Adam's Family as a game was probably one of the ones I was most proud of, and Batman as well, but for different reasons, and RoboCop and some of those classics. But Adam's Family as a game was one I really enjoyed constantly.
There you go. And that is a very, very good choice to go out on.
Yeah, thank you. Are you familiar with it? You played it?
Oh, of course. I mean, yes.
Yeah.
I played that on the Amiga. So
Right. I
yeah.
was going to say the 16-bit, the SNES
Yeah.
or Amiga, superb.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was one where I think it still came out on the C64, if memory serves me right.
It might have done, but it wouldn't have been as
yeah.
good. No.
No, yeah. I was out of it by then, so out of the 8-bit. So
Yeah.
wait. Before we leave, I have to check Adam's Family. Did it come out on 8-bit?
I think you probably did.
Yeah. Here I've got a. Yep. Commodore 64, ZX Spectrum, and Amstrad CPC. No MSX version, I'm sorry.
No, we'd finished with MSX by then. Right. But no, that was great. I mean, my time at Ocean was amazing. And I was reading something someone quoted. It was a great quote. And if you can bear with me 1 second.
Go for it.
Because I had a wonderful, wonderful time at Ocean. And there was a quote I read yesterday that was, here we go, was from the American Office TV show. And the quote is, "I wish there was a way to know you're in the good old days before you've actually left them." And that really resonated for me, because for me, Ocean was the good old days, and I had an absolute blast of a time. But not knowing that that would be maybe the most enjoyable working experience of my entire career. And you don't realize that until you've moved on. And not that I didn't enjoy everything else, I really did for different reasons. But Ocean was just a magical time. And of course, I was at this right age where I could enjoy it. Video games was the rock and roll of the era. We were having partying. We were having fantastic. I was flying to Hollywood every few weeks. I mean, I was having a dream life. It was incredible. And I never took that at all for granted. And people say to me, don't you wish you were back in those days now and doing it? And I said, no, I'm too old to enjoy it now. I'm just thankful. I'm thankful that I got to live those days. And I'm so lucky to have done it. And I don't take a modicum of it for granted at all.
And we were glad you did it because we had a lot of fun with those games.
I'm good. And that's the other shock I get, that the retro community. And because we talk about, or I talk about, we didn't know whether games would be big and so and so, so and so. What I really didn't anticipate was how much affection there would be 20 years on for those games that I was involved with in the 80s and 90s. And people still speak because it's part of the fabric of their childhood. And I never thought of it like that. Now, I went to one or two, I don't go very often, but I've been to one or two of the retro fairs, and people talk with such affection. And I think the other demonstration of that is how popular the voxel games are, which are, we moved on now, and we've got massively wonderful graphics capabilities, and people still like the blocky graphic games. Balattro's a good example.
Yeah, Minecraft, for God's sake, Roblox. I mean, it's insane.
Lego.
Yeah, there you go.
Lego blocks. And I couldn't wait to get away from it, and I won't play those because, we've moved on. But no, I get it. And it's wonderful to see.
Definitely. Gary, thank you so very much for your time. This has been absolutely fascinating.
It's been my pleasure, Carl. It's lovely to reminisce and pluck some of the old memories out of the brain. And I hope I haven't bored you too much. But
not
really
for a moment. Not for a moment.
It's
okay.
Nice. Thanks, Carl. All the very, very best.
Thanks.
Cheers. Bye.
I hope you've enjoyed another Video Game Newsroom Time Machine interview. You can leave us comments on Twitter, Instagram, and if you like what we're doing here, drop us a couple of bucks on Patreon. All the links are in the description below.